All right, welcome to Mission Critical, where we give you the essential tools to being an impactful leader and managing humans, because that's what leadership is all about, humans. And if you can't effectively manage other humans until you learn how to tackle your own obstacles, which leads me to our next guest, Sukh Sandhu. Sukh currently serves as a civilian employee for the Department of Defense in a classified section where he holds a leadership role. Now, I would love to hear more about his experience there, but I have a feeling we won't get much out of him on his current role. Lucky for us, that only scratches the surface of his expertise and experience. He has worked in the financial sector for most of his life, all the while achieving an 8th degree black belt in martial arts, running his own martial arts training company, and becoming a leading mind in the realm of firearms training. He's been named to the Business Journal's 40 Under 40 and one of the YMCA's top business leaders in 2011. Most importantly, from what I hear and from what I understand, he throws one hell of a party. Sukh, my friend, thank you for joining us.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Joe. I really am honored that you asked me to be a part of this great opportunity you got going for yourself, and love being able to have an opportunity to share with people some insights that, from my short experience of life could maybe help others, and quite frankly, learning from others to help myself. So I really appreciate having the opportunity. So thank you.
Absolutely, man. I'm excited to have the conversation. Something that's been sort of top of mind for me. You and I kind of spoke about it before we hopped on here. And one of the things I'm seeing on my consulting business side, and then also on my day job, and honestly, just kind of in society in general, is a reluctancy to handle confrontation properly. I am finding a lot more people, and not just a younger generation, I mean, top to bottom, people are reluctant to engage in any level of confrontation, whether that be, criticism on, hey, you could have done this better, all the way up to someone screws you over on a business deal and nobody does anything about it. And so I look at your background, and obviously you're someone who's well adept with confrontation. I mean, we're looking at martial arts, firearms training, and then now you work for the DoD. And I also know in your leadership roles in business, there's been moments where confrontation is just part of life, part of interacting with other humans. So I kind of wanted to first start off maybe getting a little bit more knowledge on your background and experience, and then maybe let's dig into what you think and what you've seen from your background on, one, why are we seeing this problem in individuals in not even just business but any leadership role, and two, how do we fix that? How do we address it?
Yeah, I'll share with you for me and my background. I spent almost 30 years in Fortune 100 financial services industry. So I was on the investment side, worked for a lot of the big name companies you see plenty of ads for, and banks. Worked my way up from the bottom up, if you will, from being an advisor, then into a senior vice president and a director, covering multiple states, having 300 indirect reports and 40, 45, 50 direct reports. A lot of dotted lines going everywhere, people. So when you talk about confrontation, like from that viewpoint, you have to really assert your objectives with people that don't necessarily directly report to you. The people that directly report to you that's one thing to look at, or one way to do it. People who don't directly report up under your hierarchy, it's more of a motivational type of technique rather than a do as I say technique, right?
Right.
I have found, and I'm glad you said this is about dealing with humans, right? We're dealing with people. I would tell you that I've had the opportunity to have a lot of awesome mentors and leaders in my life, and just as many not so good leaders in my life, right? Probably more of those, as we all have. But I can, off the top of my head, I can tell you in all these different realms that I've had the privilege to be a part of all my life. I've sought out people that gave me the right skill sets that I wanted to mimic, that I saw in them. That's a big key right there. If I think about the financial services world, I had three specific bosses. There was a Dan McCormick, there was a Greg DiGeronimo, a Walter DePasquale, those three individuals kind of shaped my leadership skill set. This idea that leaders are born, you've heard that saying, oh, he's a born leader, right?
Right.
I think that's a bunch of malarkey. That's just
Couldn't agree more.
Completely false.
Couldn't agree more.
I think true leadership is about service first. And if you serve others, you'll reach your objectives that you desire as well, as long as it's shared amongst the entire group, right? And so you got to find people like that you believe in and that actually have your best interest at heart. And luckily for me, those three individuals in the corporate world, were there for me and really showed me how to become the man I am today. I had a CEO named Mark Bozen, funny guy. He's retired now. All those guys are retired now, basically. But he told me one day after a big conference we had in Florida for an investment conference, and there were every big name company you can think of was there, right? There were thousands of people. We were sitting at the bar having some scotch because he loves his Dewar's and water. And he looked at me and he goes, Sukh, do you know what leadership means? And I sat there and looked at him, and I was trying to come up with all these like grandiose ideas of what I was going to say to the CEO, all this
some
stuff.
Quote you've seen.
Right.
Yeah.
And he goes, it's real simple. Before I could open my mouth, he goes, it's real simple. He goes, a leader is somebody that others will follow, period. And I sat there and I'm like, Mark, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, right? But it's true, right? If you need the guys to go up on top of the hill and over the hill, right? The only way they're going to get there is if they follow you. And if they follow you, then you're the leader. I mean, it's real simple, right? This confrontation that's been happening, if I look at it from a corporate world, right? And like having to deal with, and I had a lot of that. I had to, deal with confrontation with the people above me, right? Mm-hmm. With the next layer up above my executive level that had what they thought was important. I had confrontation from my counterparts, my business partners across the flat parallel line, and then I had confrontation from people who worked for me that didn't understand what we were trying to do, and then. Let's talk about the most important people that are involved here, and that's the consumer and the customer, right? And you have confrontation from them, right? And I had to be, a sales leader, a compliance officer, a HR director, a complaints. There was a lot involved. Mm-hmm. I have found in that world, being transparent and being honest, right, is like a lost art. And actually, it's probably in all walks of life, but definitely in that world. A lot of money involved, right? I'm talking billions of dollars. And money tends to make people say and do things that maybe they should not. That normally on any other given day, they probably wouldn't conduct themselves that way. But I have found if you're the exception and not the norm, and you're actually honest with people up front, even if you're delivering bad news, people tend to respect that a little bit better. Right. And they tend to internalize it in a different way than dealing with somebody who's being assertive or aggressive or doesn't agree with you because they're not able to see your viewpoint. Or quite frankly, maybe you're not able to see theirs, which again comes back to what I was saying earlier, which is about, servitude leadership, right? Service leadership. Joe, at the end of the day, every human being wants purpose in this world. Oh, fair? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Every human being wants to feel some sense of purpose. And
that's why I signed up in a recruiting office when I was 18. I had no idea what I was signing, but I did.
Right. Well, you were a Marine, so here you go. Right. But see, at the end of the day, right, like purpose then gives the human soul value, right? And so from a corporate standpoint, I think about, I had a great mentor. His name was John Gardner. And this is, God, dare I say it, like 40 years ago, probably, right? I'm not that old, by the way. Anyways, he said to me one day, Sukh, you're a smart kid, man. You're a smart young man. And I was a broker at the time, working under him. He was a senior broker. And he says to me, he goes, you know a lot of stuff, because I was studying and reading about equities and bonds and doing all this stuff that I was trying to just get my foot in the world, right? And he said to me, but here's the deal, Sukh. At the end of the day, nobody really cares how much you know. All they want to know is how much you care.
Right. Wow.
Now, at the time, that's an old saying, I believe, but at the time, it didn't really dawn on me. But as I got into more and more leadership roles, and almost by default, I wasn't actively engaged in trying to find these in the beginning, like to be the leader. I just wanted to do my thing, make a bunch of money, and whatever. I started thinking more and more about that. And it's true. Like, if you can prove to people you care about them, right, they will go through walls for you.
Right.
Right. I mean, with all my people that ever, I had the pleasure to work with and be a part of the team, I never tell them to call me boss. I never tell them to call me senior VP of this. I didn't want any of that. I'm a teammate. We're on the team together. I have a job to do. You have a job to do, right? Your job's a hell of a lot more important than mine is what I would tell them. And
absolutely. And one of my favorite phrases on that I live by this. If you have to tell people you're their leader, you're not their leader.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. Right. And I would, one thing I made a really hard effort at, I would have them fill out a questionnaire every January, at the beginning of every year. And it was things like, tell me what your your spouse's name is. Tell me your children's names. How old are they? What are they involved in? What do they like doing? Where do you like to go vacation? What are some personal goals for you? And I would break it out. And I do this at my martial arts schools as well. I want a physical goal every year. What are your physical health goals, right? I want to lose 20 pounds. I want to be able to do this. I want to do that. I want a mental one, like you're going to get another degree in something, or you're going to start studying XYZ. You're going to pick up this other mental skill. And then I'll call it a emotional or faith. What is it that you believe is your objective in some type of, stability within your own soul, right? Your spirit. And to me, spirit is all about confidence. Okay. And now this is kind of dicey, right? There's a fine line between arrogance and confidence.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And sometimes people can't distinguish the two, and you have to be very careful when you're walking that line. I love being able to walk into a room and everybody's like, man, who's that dude? But I don't want to walk into that room and be like, hey, look at me, right? Like there's a different mentality. And that's something I would do with my people. And I'm like, I got to know them and find out what was important to them. Once I understood that, they understood what was important to me. And I shared, well, this is my life. This is what I do. These are the things I'm into, right? And then, oh, by the way, we have a job to do together. And we have this objective, right?
Good.
I want us to fulfill these objectives because at the end of the day, those objectives are the things that are going to fulfill your personal goals and what you want out of life. And which also, in the same token, is going to fulfill my goals, right? And what I want out of life.
Right.
I want to be an active participant in other people's success and growth. Now, that is really... I think it's a great statement that I've heard a lot of leaders and pundits say through all my years, but there are very few people that actually walk that walk. And when you can truly share that with someone, they'll grasp onto it. It'll be a part of who they are. And they'll always be by your side. I was actually telling someone the other day, we were talking about turnover, right? And like people leaving. Now, huge problem today. I mean, people are bouncing not only just jobs, but companies, careers. We're talking every 6 months. It's almost. I heard an executive tell me recently he feels like it's a viral trend to leave your job as soon as you can, just to go to another job that's almost exactly the same. Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, and like it's like you talk about having to have uncomfortable conversations, right, with people, the confrontational conversations. And I'm talking now from essentially from a corporate standpoint, but it flows into everything else. And I'll absolutely give you a different mindset from that opinion. But, at the end of the day, I love when people say, like I was talking to my daughters not too long ago about what they want to do when they grow up, and they're young, right? And, my one daughter's like, oh, I want to be a doctor. Oh, I want to be a veterinarian. I want, whatever. And I'm like, that's fantastic. You're going to have to do X, Y, and Z and good grades. And then my one daughter's like, well, I think I want to be a hairdresser. And I'm like, okay, great. I said, okay, well, do you like the nice house we live in? Do you like the vacations we take? So I worked her backwards. I'm like, you like all those things, right? I go, well, how much money do you think you would make doing that job? And she kind of, she doesn't really know. She's young. Excuse me. And I said, you have to work things backwards on this idea of, just follow your passion. Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I would tell you that I would say, instead of following your passion, how about you follow your skill and your talent? Passion is about emotion that you use after you find success in something. Right. All right. So to me, it's like, I was telling my one daughter, I'm like, I'll tell you what, you can go to school and get a certification as being a salon person or hairdresser or whatever they're called. I don't know. I apologize. But what I would also like you to do is get a business degree so that you could own the salon.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's a different way. That's a different way of looking at things. And so, when we're talking about like, what is it that, how do you work through a challenge or an uncomfortable conversation with someone? It's like this, right? Like how do you create change, right? I mean, one thing human beings hate is change, right? And I don't care what our lives are, right? Like we
like complaining, saying we want change, but then when it happens, we're like, what the hell is this?
Right. So, to me, like change is all about, so if there's a confrontation, right, you and I are disagreeing about something and you're really heated and upset about it. And I need to, calm everybody down and then get to a solution, because ultimately we need to get to a solution that's acceptable or amiable to everybody. Right. So, the first thing is like, there's got to be an idea, right, of what the issue is. We have to put some thought into it. Like why is this challenge a challenge? We're going to have some feelings about it, right? Maybe some bad words thrown out and some, chest pumping and whatever it may be. And then we got to come up with a plan of action, right? And then from that plan, we'll create, and this is kind of a broader scale, some kind of habits, right? From those habits, we will then get committed to doing the habits, right? And, those commitments hopefully will become a part of our lifestyle. And then from that lifestyle, we'll able to affect change. Now, I just share that with you because I hear a lot of people say, man, I really hope this happens. I really hope Joe hits the lottery next week. Right. And I am guilty of this as anyone else, of using, I hope so. When somebody says, well, I hope you get this. Well, I hope so. Right. But the more I've thought about it, and this goes back to what I just said, hope is a desire to achieve an objective without a plan, without commitment, without feelings and thought about the idea that you initially wanted to happen, right? I would rather use the word faith, right? Because faith means you have created a process, a plan, and you're moving down a path. Now, you can course correct at any time, right? Because that's just the nature of the world. But faith in your leader, faith in your idea, faith in your people, faith in your plan is really important, right? It's interesting. I was reading something the other day. I think it was like maybe 2017, something like that. So when you look at the different branches of the military, and you're a veteran, and thank you for your service, and also a police officer, and thank you for your service there as well. But in 2017, there were two ships that had some significant issues for the U.S. Navy, right? And the Navy is a little bit different in their hierarchy and how they lead, right, versus the other branches a little bit. And the USS Fitzgerald, the USS McCain, they basically ran into something. Each, like one happened in 1 month, one happened another month, right? And of course, the leadership was like, well, we don't know why the first ship crashed and the second one and this and that. And it turns out that the Navy's hierarchy is that they had a stronger culture in the military world, in our military world, of giving their people autonomy. Okay. And as a person who works for someone else, you want autonomy, right? That is really important. However, if you haven't trained them or led them or taught them what it is you want them to have autonomy in, we're human beings. We're probably just going to do what we're going to do. And then stuff happens that we did not want to happen. Now, coming back to confrontation with all of this, if you're interacting with someone and it's not a pleasant conversation, you got to be transparent. And I'm talking about that honesty piece again. And you got to share with them, help me understand what your challenge is, right? And what's interesting about confrontation in like a business setting, a lot of times people can't articulate truly what it is that they're up to.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right. And you're talking about, like, and dare I say it, today's generations, right? I think the way our educational systems are set up, the way our lives are set up, a lot of our younger generations have a feeling of things are just a certain way and they should be that way.
Right.
You know, I'm a first generation immigrant to this great nation. We worked our tails off. We had nothing. We created something. Everything we had to work for. Like nothing was ever handed to us, right? We never took any government aid. Nothing. Okay. And yet we have people here that tend to get a lot of things that we didn't have. Like, yes, it's true. As a parent, you want your children, the next generations, to have the things you didn't. Right. Sometimes I question myself, and I think it's a little bit of a disservice because I think I'm taking away a little bit of the skill set that they need to learn through their own self-discovery of failure. Absolutely. Failure is really important, right? Failure teaches you how to succeed. As long as the failure is not like completely detrimental to your life, right? But
right.
It's very important. And I don't believe that most of our youth are allowed to fail. Like they are put in a position where it's not that failure is not an option. They don't even get into the environment where they could fail.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
And that was a broad brush, and I'll probably make some people mad by saying what I just said. But the reality is, I'm not saying that all these generations are that way, and I'm not saying that there's not younger folks that get it. I'm just saying if I look across the landscape, there appears to be more of that than the other, maybe, right?
Right.
But, you know, you have to like find out what is it truly that you're upset about. And that's only going to happen through a completely honest, transparent conversation. If you start butting heads, and we see this, we see it in politics all the time, right? It's not beneficial really for anybody, and it doesn't achieve anything. You know, you don't want a I win, you lose scenario, and you don't want a you win, I lose scenario. You want we both win, and then our entire team wins. All right. And I think about, in from a martial arts perspective, right, or from a combative perspective, right, you're going to have people, let's say in the civilian world, right, where it's going to be the typical, I'm the tough guy, I don't like the way you looked at me, and I'm going to peacock all over the place and, and punch you in the face 5 times, and then I win or whatever it is.
Right.
The reality is, though, there are a lot of people on this planet that would not fly with, right? I mean, there are people that you may think that about some confrontation over something that's really minuscule and irrelevant in the broader scope of life. And most people, like I am more inclined to walk away from things, as I have for years, because you get to a point, and this is that spirit or confidence. I don't have anything to prove to anybody. I don't need to showcase anything to anyone. Yeah. And if it's something where it's life-threatening to my family, my friends, or to me, that's a different scenario. But those type of confrontations are very direct. Again, honest. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? So honesty and directness, it's like one and the same. We can have a honest, direct conversation, polite, right? Hopefully. Right. And I understand what your issue is, and we come to a conclusion. We can have a direct physical exchange, and it's going to be very direct and honest. There's not going to be anything in between. Right. And then someone's going to walk away, hopefully the right person. But, I have found it interesting because, like, even through the martial arts schools, we have a lot of younger folks, right? We have kids classes, we have teenagers and college kids, and I'm glad they're in there. I'm glad they're challenging themselves and they're pushing themselves, and they're learning to fail every class. And then from that failure, they're going to learn how to win, right? Win, whatever that means, which hopefully will give them strength to understand that if they push themselves, they can move forward and into the exception and not the norm of what we see in society today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you're saying about the difference between confidence and kind of that cockiness. And it's funny, I was having a conversation with a young female professional, and it came up some of my background because I was getting into some of my intellectual property and things that I teach. And so, of course, that's very tied to my background. And she kind of stops in the middle of the conversation and goes, why is it that the guys that are the most badass are the ones that always seem the nicest and sweetest? And I kind of thought about it for a second, and the only way I could describe it to her was the way that I was taught when I got into working with working dogs. Not me personally, but I had a canine handler with me, and he was educating us on these dogs that, I mean, they're meant to be attack dogs. They literally are bred and trained to attack and destroy things. And the way he described the difference between that kind of cockiness and actual confidence is, he said, say you're chasing someone down the street and you jump over a fence and you hear a dog just barking, 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 barking. He says, don't worry about that dog, because the dog's barking because it's scared. Mm-hmm. And it thinks it has something to prove. But if you jump the fence and you look over and you see a dog slowly stand up and just stare at you, he goes, you need to get the hell out of that yard, because that dog will tear you up. And I mean, and that's exactly what it is, right? You know, when you have true confidence, not false confidence, not a false bravado or an image that you put on or a mask that you wear, there's no need to force your personality or yourself or your image on people. It just exists. And the interesting thing is that other people sense that. Sometimes they don't even rationalize that they sense that, but they do. And it's interesting when I've seen people that have that level of confidence and they walk in a room, they may not even recognize it, but everyone looks at them and everyone listens to them. And when they speak, suddenly the room gets quiet. And then those loud ones that just bark and bark and bark and bark, they can keep barking all they want and people kind of blow it off.
Yeah.
And so I think there's something really powerful there. Now I want to hit on something that you brought up a little bit earlier that I have a genuine question about, because you talked about how, hey, okay, maybe there's a confrontation. We don't agree. Let's use an example where there's, a project that we're working on in business and we disagree on what we need to do. And you said, well, at some point we kind of have to calm down, get to the same level, understand people have different feelings and emotions around it, but let's come up with a plan. Here's one of the problems I've been seeing lately is sometimes there's parties that it seems like they don't want to come up with a plan. They just want to complain or express their emotion, and getting them to a point where they actually do desire to come up with a resolution seems to be a struggle. And it's becoming more prevalent in the groups that I've been working with, and I've witnessed it sitting in on meetings where I'm coaching or consulting. And there are a few people where they express frustration or something that they're struggling with, but they have absolutely not only no plan in place or plan that they've been thinking about or resolution they've been thinking about, but they don't even seem to have a desire to want to reach it. The moment you start, even when you try to calm them down, say, okay, hey, let's come up with a resolution, they just want to keep reiterating their point of, well, I don't have time, or this isn't possible, or this can't be done. It's like, okay, we can sit here and say that over and over, but what's the next step? And I'll be honest, even from my perspective, I've struggled on the coaching side helping people overcome this, because it is so foreign to me. When there is a problem, I understand emotions get involved. Yeah. I understand that sometimes when you attack someone's idea, you're in their perspective, you're attacking them. I understand that. I understand that level of communication, but I do struggle with when there's a party who just seems to not even want to reach that plan. How would someone with your background, your expertise, clearly knowledgeable on these types of circumstances, how do you imagine attacking that situation? How do you get them on board with you?
You said a lot there, and to me, I'm a
business coach, man. I say a lot all the time.
I get it. Hey, man, I get it. From a business standpoint, though, right? Like that permeates life. That's just life. That could be you and your spouse, right? Yeah. Disagreeing about the color of the paint on the wall. I don't know, whatever. Here's what I would, what I would envision or see. Like, at the end of the day, leadership to me is not about the guy that's up here. Leadership starts at the individuals that are the lowest ranked, right? They can exemplify leadership characteristics and traits as long as they're getting good direction and guidance from the person that is the leader, right? We used to have this thing. I took so many leadership classes in the financial services world. I mean, it was nauseating, and everyone's got a spin on it. And there was something called shadow of the leader, right? So whatever the shadow of the leader that he exhibits that falls on his or her people, that'll dictate kind of the direction of how they conduct themselves. Learning what's important to someone else, right? How do I make you successful, Joe? What can I do to help you be successful? We have a project here and you have an idea about it. I have an idea about it. And I can tell you, I work for the DoD now. Man, I see this every day. Trust me, everything you just said, spot on.
What?
So
Government?
Yeah,
really?
Believe it or not, right? But it's one of those things is, are you so vested in this thought process that you can't see any other variables or options to accomplish this goal? And I think the first conversation would be, or the first question would be, is what is our objective? Right? Collectively, what are we trying to do together here? Like, we need to hit, quarterly earnings, right? We got to hit X in quarterly earnings, right? Okay. So, we can say that's the goal. Now let's talk about what are we going to do to get to those goals? You believe it's X. I believe it's Y. Okay. Let's talk about yours first, right? Tell me why you believe it's about X, because I need to understand. I want to know. All I care about is that you and we hit the objective. I don't care how we get there, but that's what we got to hit. But I need to understand your viewpoint first. I need to understand the pros of it, right? And I need to understand the cons of it. And then I want to share with you my thoughts on why, like the letter Y, not why, right? This is why I believe this particular avenue is the best path. And here's where, you know what? I didn't think about the pros or the cons on this. I didn't think about that. And it's just a conversation. And at the end of the conversation, it's got to be about, hey, we're in this together, right? We're teammates here. And as teammates, we got to push forward to hit the objective. I see it all the time where people are bringing ideas to the table. Somebody else brings an idea to the table, and it's a lot of this going on and a lot of this going on. And literally, we have meeting after meeting after meeting, and nothing is actually going down the field. We are not pushing the ball to the end zone, right? And in fact, I would dare say that when you're not moving forward, right, you're actually moving backwards because the world is moving forward, right? It's like, there's an old saying, a Chinese saying from some great warrior and general that was, if you're living in the past, right, you have anxiety. I'm sorry, not anxiety. You have depression. You're depressed.
Okay.
Right, because you're thinking about things that have already happened that you can no longer change.
Right.
If you're living in the future, you have anxiety because you're thinking about things that haven't happened yet. Right. And in business, especially, there's lots of anxiety. Right. We're always thinking about, well, if I do this, will this happen? If I do this path, will that happen? But you don't know. The reality is, if we all just come back to living in the present, we'll find some peace and some tranquility in our mind to make the right decisions to move forward. Unfortunately, most people are in the present, but they're not living in the present. And then what they're actually doing is stalling and falling backwards.
Yeah.
Right. So, I don't know if I answered your question fully, but to me, it's just about having that conversation. Share with me what you believe our collective goal is. Share with me what the best things of your idea are. Share with me what are the worst things. What are the cons? Yeah. And I'm not telling you. I want you to tell me. Like it's like this, Joe. I learned this a long time ago because I was a culprit and I was guilty of this. Because of all the roles I've had in my different walks of life, people were always coming to me asking for advice, nonstop. I mean, I should have been charging therapy bills. I'd probably be a gazillionaire by now. And I would immediately give them some advice. Yeah. I would immediately give them an opinion. And I realized, and it was really training in the dojo and on the mats. I kind of figured this out about 10 years ago. I have such a strong desire for other people to be successful, right? That when I would see them doing stuff, I'd jump in, tell them, no, do this, hand over here, your leg needs to go over here, sweep over here, throw, whatever, right? That it was overloading their brains. And they were like, just completely like, oh my God. And instead of feeling good after every interaction, they actually felt maybe worse, right? They maybe felt like, God, I failed, I sucked today, whatever, right? So I figured out, there's no point in giving an opinion to someone until they're ready to accept your advice. And so now what I started doing some years ago is when people would come to me with challenges and issues, I would say to them, are you just talking to me to vent, Joe? Or would you like my opinion? Because I'm not going to give it if you just want to vent. And that's okay too. Like if you need to vent, you got to get off your chest. I totally get it. But if you want my opinion, tell me and I'll tell you what I think from my experience, knowledge, and whatever. And it doesn't mean it's right, but I'll share it with you. But if you don't want it, I'm not giving it. And I think that's a good way to be. So in this situation of two people fighting over what's going to be the path forward, ask them, what do you think's great about it? And tell me what you think's not so great about it. And probably the real arrogant, egotistical people will be like, my plan is perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you're doing that in a setting with another person, I would be a bet man to say, they're going to say, well, I guess maybe this would happen or that could happen and then that would happen and that wouldn't work out, and go, okay, well, let me share with you what I think about my plan. Here's why I think it would work. And I got to think a little bit too. Here's why it wouldn't work. And then from there, I think you are able to build, this is a contact sport, brother. Everything's a contact sport. It means human contact.
Yep.
You're doing your SWOT analysis, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats, right? You got to gather intelligence, right? You got to know what's going on. The reality is most things that get us in life are the things that we never see coming. Fair?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, one of the biggest threats is not knowing your people. One of the biggest threats that I see is not knowing my counterpart that we're working towards a shared goal. And I don't really know what your desires in life are. I don't know what your desires in this particular project is. But once I do, I'll be able to manage my beliefs and your beliefs, and maybe we can come together on something. We got to figure out who are the stakeholders here, right? Who are the stakeholders and who's going to benefit? And, I see this like even in a physical confrontation, Joe. You've been in a lot. Things start slowly and then they execute really fast.
Yep.
Right.
That tipping point. Yep.
Okay. So, and it's like things just start kind of at a pace. The next thing you know, wham, something's going down. But it wasn't like it wasn't seen. We just chose to ignore it. When you're able to work with another individual with differing views, as long as you're working forward, right? You're moving towards that same objective that you both have agreed that that's your objective, because that was step one, and you've been able to lay out your thoughts and the other person laid out their thoughts, and you've talked about the pros and cons of it, you can start moving forward with an idea. Maybe that's both, or it's integrated, or maybe you do pick one over the other. I don't know. Right. But this is like flying a plane as you're building it, essentially. I mean, because if you're sitting around waiting for the perfect plane to be built, it'll never get off the ground. So your project and your idea will never, ever leave. Right. I mean, this is about humility and transparency and honesty. And when you talk with someone, I was talking earlier, I mentioned turnover rates, HR and stuff, right? I somehow, fortunately, never had any bad turnover in all my years. I don't know how. I'm very blessed with the people who had to work with me. Now, we had turnover with people that needed to be coached out. If they couldn't be coached up, they had to be coached out. But
there's always some level. Always some level.
But by and large, I never lost anybody. And I've thought about that over the last few years. I'm like, wow, how did that happen? I know I'm not that cool of a dude, right? I don't know how that happened. But you know what it was about? It was about the humility, the understanding, right? I used to tell my guys who my guys used to make $500,000 and up a year. Okay. I mean, they made big bucks. I was like, don't drive the Benz and the Vet and the Ferrari to work. Drive the Honda, for God's sakes. Because you work with a lot of people. You touch a lot of people, right? It's like, what is that? Kipling's poem, right? Like, keep the common touch and walk with kings, right? Like, be able to interact with people on a level that people want to be interacted with, and at the same, in the same vein, have the character and the charisma to walk with kings, right? I mean, have a disciplined approach. Be consistent. That is huge to me, consistency. Whatever it means to you. 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week,
right.
once a month, whatever, right? Those are all important habits to create these characteristics to be able to engage with someone that doesn't agree with you. Being able to, one of my challenges in life has always been keep my emotions in check. I'm a pretty passionate, emotional guy, especially after a couple of tequila shots. But I'd like to think that I've grown as a person, in that I can sit back a little bit and table that. And once I can table that, I can understand truly what's important to you when I'm disagreeing with you. As long as we can truly get to what it is that's important to you. And I think that, from a business coach standpoint, that's your challenge, right? Like, okay, you don't want to do XYZ, but you can't tell me why.
Right.
And just saying, well, my idea is better. That doesn't cut it. Like there's got to be more meat to this,
right.
to this bone for us to understand. And I think more and more leadership individuals in the corporate world, if they conducted themselves that way, were more, hey, we got layoffs. We had plenty of times we had to reorg and we had layoffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hide it from people. Okay. I had counterparts that I'm not telling my people they're going to jump ship. Right. I'm like, no, that's wrong.
Yeah. I
went to my people. I'm saying it now out loud, but I don't work for them anymore, so they can't nail me for this, right? But I would go to my people and say, hey, here's the skinny. I just want to give you a heads up. You may want to just get your resume ready and start thinking about other things. Hopefully things will, pan out. But in case they don't, I want to give you an opportunity and some time to figure this out for you and your family, right? That type of transparency, it needs to be more like that, I think.
Yeah.
I think, if I look back to like the 90s, early 2000s, a lot of the leaders in the world I came from, a lot of it had to do with, the Ivy League schools they went to and the connections they had, and they kind of were all of the same mindset and thought process.
Yeah.
Though they may share and say we're all about the employees and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think
we're a family here.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I think what it was really about was they're being taught that, hey, you got to stuff your pockets as quick as you can and as fast as you can before you get pushed out to move to the next place. And unfortunately, that's very evident, right? Especially when you're dealing with the investment banking world and things like that, which is a shame because I believed, and I still do in my heart of hearts, the tremendously strong and successful leaders that I saw were not like that. They took care of their people, right? They kept the BS from up above off of their people. They dealt with the challenges that their people were having, and they were able to facilitate an avenue, a process for them to be successful, right? Like, hey, I know you're not doing well this month, or last month wasn't a good month for you. How many phone calls did you make? How many clients did you meet with?
Right.
Things like that are really important. And if you get back to those basics, the consistency and the habits, they'll pay off. And you have to have faith, not hope, faith in that process because it's proven it'll work. And that's something that's important to me because I think that showcases someone's character.
Yeah.
I think character will outlive your reputation.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds kind of hippy dippy to some people when you're like, dude, just essentially conduct yourself in a respectable, moral way in business or whatever your role is, coaching someone, whatever it might be, military, law enforcement. If you conduct yourself in a moral way, the success comes. And I know that it sounds kind of, like I said, hippy dippy, and you're like, okay, whatever. Yeah, I'm gonna, envision this and it's gonna happen and all that stuff. And that's not what I'm saying, but good things tend to come to good people. And unfortunately, I agree with you. I think there's this vein in our society that says, just focus on the money, get yours, get everything you can out of something and leave. I think that's part of the reason we see some of this turnover is, people come into roles and they're like, yeah, I'm going to be here for 6 months. I'm going to get as much money as I can. And then I'm going to use this position to leverage something somewhere else. And sometimes that makes sense, but I'm not saying it doesn't. But the fact that that's the culture in the workforce right now is concerning to me. I want to touch on something, and this might be a little selfish because I know it's something that I struggle with, but you hit a point that it resonated with me. And you talked about being present. And it was a little earlier in our conversation, but you talked about being present, and that just like stuck a little itch in the back of my head, where I'm like, oh man, I feel like he's talking to you, Joe. Come on, man. I'll be completely transparent. I struggle with some of that living in the past. I've lived a very exciting life, even for my younger age. And sometimes it's hard to go from jumping out of planes, blowing up walls, and taking out bad guys, to sitting in my office and working on spreadsheets. And then sometimes I do. You look in the mirror and you go, is this my life now? Like, is this it? And I don't think you have to do the things I've done to maybe feel that sentiment and kind of feel stuck in the past a little bit. Or on the contrary, concerned about the future. We do live in, and I genuinely believe this. I don't think this is an illegitimate concern, but we live in semi-volatile times. Not that the world hasn't seen other even more volatile times before, but we do live in some pretty volatile times, and there's some uncertainty. And I know of people that do live in that state of anxiety of like, well, what's going to happen? What's my plan? What am I going to do? What's my future look like? So I think you're touching on something, not just in the workplace, not just in leadership, but really you're putting your finger on the pulse of something that's going on in society, in that we are not living in the present. I've had a conversation, listeners know Manny, obviously. He runs the parent company or the parent group for this podcast, and then he hosts his own podcast. And we had a conversation, and some of that we kind of started touching on, like, well, maybe is part of it social media? There is a lot of living outside of your reality and living in this different reality. And I think there's some validity to that. But I just kind of wanted you to go deeper into that a little bit and talk about living in the moment, and maybe what lessons have you learned, or what experience brought you to that little nugget of wisdom, and how do we apply that, not just in our workplace, not just in our job, but really in our everyday lives?
It's very interesting that a person such as yourself is thinking those thoughts at this point in your young life, right? I have a lot of friends in the special operations community. I've known a lot of guys from different branches that have done some incredible things, and they've gotten out, and they're lost.
Yeah.
And, they're like, man, I used to jump out of planes. I used to blow up, all that stuff you just said, like all of it. And they're like, and now I'm like sitting at home, taking care of the dog, taking my kids to school, put them on the bus, and and I got this job, and I'm like, what am I doing? And I think this comes back to, what's your purpose, right? And here's the deal: our purposes, I think, as human beings, it's not one purpose at one time. I think it's multiple purposes through the course in this journey that we're on. Okay. And you just have to kind of recorrect your thought process and how you're looking at the value that you're giving others. Like right now, Joe, you're doing this podcast, right? You're bringing value to your viewership, your audience, right? From your conversations, your questions, your thoughts, and the great guests that you have on your show, right? But like, that is a value you're bringing. So your purpose, it's not the same purpose, but it is. It's just from a different viewpoint. Right. And I can tell you, I've got a lot of friends from the SEAL teams, and the conversation you just shared with me, that's exactly kind of what they shared, right? Oh, yeah. And it's like they miss the brotherhood. They miss, this camaraderie. They miss doing all this cool stuff that they had the opportunity to do that, our great nation paid them to do they paid me to do this stuff. Can you believe it? But they're out now, right? They're in their 40s. They're in their late 30s. They've got families. They've got, real life responsibilities. I think you have to find what is it that you can still offer with the same kind of mindset that you had before in your new environment, right? I mean, you just think about it. So when you were in the Marine Corps, right, you were, probably in swampy environments, you were in jungles, you were in Arctic environments, you were in ocean. They're all different environments, right? And you have to change certain skill sets to be in those environments.
I was in Thailand. That was a whole different environment.
Yeah. I've been there. I know. So, but like your mindset and your purpose was still the same.
Right.
Fair? Right.
Absolutely.
So now you're in a different environment, and your environment is, in the civilian world, you're a business coach, you got a family, and your purpose hasn't changed, but your environment has. So therefore you have to have a skill set that meets the new environment that fulfills the same purpose, which I believe from a warrior mentality, that's something that's to my core. We're from in India. We're the warrior class of India. It's kind of bred into us.
Right.
It permeates everything we do. It doesn't mean we're running around, trying to be all tough and screaming and yelling. It's got nothing to do with that. It has to do with the way your mind thinks and the way you conduct yourself. A lot of warrior mentality really is about serving others. Because if it's all about serving yourself, you're just a bully.
Yeah.
And if you're just a bully, eventually another bigger, badder bully is going to come along.
Right.
Because you don't truly believe in your purpose, because you don't have any other than to be a bully. You have a purpose from what you've done in your past in serving others. I mean, you may have gone to the Marine Corps because I didn't know what I was doing, and I like green crayons, right? I love my green crayons.
I drank too much in high school.
Right. And, and I want to go do some cool stuff. But at some point, you're like, man, I have a purpose here. My purpose is to serve others. My purpose is to serve the guy on my right and my left. My purpose is to serve my nation. My purpose is to serve my community, my family, my friends, so on and so forth. Then you get out and you become a police officer, and you're doing the same dang thing, which is fantastic. And now you're kind of away from that world to some degree, right? But you still have the same purpose. You're serving others. And that's what I tell like a lot of my friends that kind of have had the same, emotional and mental challenges. That's just my 2 cents, like off the top of my head. We could get really in depth with this, especially if we get a bottle of bourbon. But all I'm saying is like, don't ever negate what you've done in the past, and don't ever have regrets about what you may or may not have done, because every decision that happened before this moment is what got you to this moment. Right. So, I've had some things come up recently, that I've been struggling with a little bit. I've got a great opportunity to do something very similar to what you're talking about. And I'm like, I'm an old man. But they're like, I think we could get you a waiver, an age waiver, right? And and I'm like, And it's been a little bit of a toss up for me because I'm a single dad and I got 3 young daughters. So I'm over here trying to balance this out. What's more important? And I've always told myself I'll never dwell on having regrets. I'll think about things that happened in the past and hopefully learn something from them.
Yeah, lessons learned.
To help me go to the future. And then here's the other thing, and this is a hard one for me because I'm a control freak. I'm a complete type A, freaking nutty type A, right? The future, I was always trying to like get to this level of security financially and this, and I need to take care of that. And the reality is anybody going to die? This is kind of, it could, but let's just say there's not. Is anybody going to die? Am I going to die? Is anybody going to get, is there going to be a detrimental event that's going to completely catastrophically destroy all kinds of things? The answer is no, right? And I'm over here, feeling, I'll say anxious. Like, this is funny too. I never have ever used the word anxiety or ever felt anxious, right? That's just kind of come up in the last couple of years with what's been going on in my personal life. And I'm like, I've never felt this way before. This is weird, right? Because I never worried about necessarily the things that are going to happen or aren't going to happen. Yeah. And at some point I just realized, hey man, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And I'm going to do the best I can in the moment I'm at. And like for a business leader, right? They're always worrying. I mean, I was always worrying about hitting goal and hitting the next, number on that I was told by the board of directors or whatever it was. But the reality is whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And if I gave my best shot and somebody else thinks you suck, Well, then that's what it is.
Yep.
Right? Now,
Yep.
we can always do better. It's funny. I had
Right.
T-shirts made up for the school, and they say "do better" on the back. It's just kind of something funny. I was like, "Do better," right? But we can always do better.
Right.
No matter how great you become, you can always do better. Period.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now, I think I love your advice and kind of your knowledge and wisdom coming on. Maybe living in the past a little bit too much. I mean, not necessarily living in the past, but letting it affect your present. Something that I'm kind of with you. I don't struggle with, but I'm seeing a lot of it now is the future and the anxiety that comes from the future. I'm kind of in the same boat of you. I'm like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I think some of that just comes from the experiences that guys like I or you have had where you are out of control. I mean, you talk about the Middle East, especially the Middle East wars. IEDs are a thing. And, we did a lot of stuff to try to mitigate that risk. But at the end of the day, we all kind of accepted at any point I could step at the wrong spot and I'm gone. And that's just the way it is. And the only way to still be effective at our jobs was to accept that. As much as that is not the most beautiful story, it actually, I feel blessed in a way to have had that experience, because now, something comes up in business and everyone's like, "Oh, we're gonna lose everything. This might go around." I'm like, "Well, all right." It is what it is. Let's do what we can. Let's mitigate the best we can. But if it happens, that was out of our control. So like I said, I'm kind of with you. I don't struggle with that as much, but I do deal with people that are struggling with that. Mm-hmm. And, I'm sure there's other listeners out there that have this same problem that I do, where because I don't understand it fully, I struggle in advising on it. And I'll give you an example. I'm still taking classes, working towards my MBA right now. And I get in a class and we had a test, an exam, not a hard exam, honestly, almost obnoxiously easy exam. Felt like you couldn't even give the wrong answer if you wanted to. And our time limit was, I'm not kidding you, 2.5 hours. And this was not like a 200 question exam. We're talking, we're talking 18 questions, 18 questions, 2.5 hours. It's a remote class. So you're also at home in your pajamas with your dog, probably having a whiskey when you lean off the camera, right?
Yeah.
And after the test, like half the class was complaining to the professor about the time limit and how the fact that there was a clock on their screen counting down the time limit gave them so much anxiety that they couldn't finish the test and they left. And I could not wrap my head around that. I'm like, are you kidding? And I actually felt bad for this professor. And I felt bad for him. Mind you, he's not exactly my favorite person in the world. He said some stuff where I'm like, okay, dude, I'm not sure I'm on board with that. But yeah, it's not like him and I are close, but I felt genuinely bad for him because he's trying to figure out how to tell these people, like, are you fucking serious? Yeah. But of course, he's in a professional setting and he's trying to like, oh, I hear your concerns. And I almost turned on my microphone. I'm like, y'all are a bunch of wimps. What the hell are you talking about? Like, if you get out into the actual real world and try to get a job and say, oh my God, your deadline is stressing me out, so I just quit working completely.
Right.
So my question for you is, and if it was only one person in the class, I probably wouldn't even bring up this story because there's always nut jobs out there, right?
Sure.
But it was legitimately half the class. And my question for you is, how do you work with that person? And I know there's no magic pill that they're going to take and suddenly understand the things that you understand, right? But how do you work with that person? Or is that the type of person you just got to cut out?
You just hit on a lot of really, really important things there, Joe. So, first off, I'm not telling you or anyone that they shouldn't be thinking about what the future is. What is the picture you want to paint for your life going forward? But in doing that, like what I was saying about my daughter earlier on, right? Like, I worked backwards with her. You like having the nice house and the vacations and the car and blah, right? Well, once you kind of do that, then you have to like put a plan into place to get it.
Right.
So again, to me, it sounds like, okay, I want to paint this picture. This is what I want in my life. Maybe it's, I want to have a really big house, lots of money, and I want to have a pool, and I want to have a beautiful spouse, and I want to have this, I want to travel. Okay, that's fantastic. And there's nothing wrong with any of those things. But what's my plan to get it? And then going back to what we've been saying earlier, what are the habits I'm going to implement for myself based upon the idea, right? The picture that I want, and the thought I put into the picture or the idea, and then the feelings and emotions that I've drawn up within myself, the desire to want it, right? So that I have faith in this plan. So when I'm sitting there in this exam and the clock's ticking down, I did all the prep work. I busted my butt. I studied an hour a day, every day for 3 months. I know the material inside and out. And at the end of it, whatever the outcome is, the chips will fall where they fall. This is very interesting because you kind of touched on this a moment ago. I had a get together not too long ago, and a big one. And
really? You don't say?
And I had a great country band up here, and everybody was having a great time. But I was saying my thank you to all these wonderful people in my life. It was really about them. The party was for them. They were all like, "What's this about? Are you getting engaged? Or you did?" I'm like, "No, I'm not doing any of those things." This is my way to say thank you to all of you for supporting me, standing by me. And one thing that I shared with all of them was that at some point when you have what you believe is an unsurmountable challenge in your life, like about your future, right? The moment you accept whatever the outcomes will be, that's the moment you're in the present, and you will be at peace, and you'll have some tranquility. And from that in your mind, I believe you'll have the ability to think clearly. And if you have to course correct, it'll come to you.
Yeah.
But when you're so vested with that anxiety, that anxious behavior, your mind can't give you the solutions that you need to push forward. And the solution may be, hey, man, I got to cut this guy loose. Right. Like I used to tell the people who worked for me all the time, they had huge books of business, right? Lots of clients. And we would differentiate these clients, an A client, a B, a C, whatever, right? The A was the ones that and this is again, back to habits, consistency. I talk to them every week, once a week. B clients, I talk to them, every 3 weeks, right? The C clients, I talk to them once a month. D clients, I only talk to them if they call me. Right. But at some point, right, depending on like the revenue they were generating for them, or the interactions they were having, or maybe it's the dollar amount they had invested with them, whatever it may be, whatever your criteria is for that, some of those individuals just don't fit in your world anymore, and therefore you're going to have to cut them loose.
Right.
And there's this, well, I can't, this guy doesn't have anything and he needs my help. I get it. You only have so many hours in a day. Right? You've got a wife, you've got kids, you've got a dog, you got a job, you got a lawn to mow, you've got family and friends that you help out. There's only so many hours in a day. So how much time are you going to use on things that are not beneficially moving towards the shared objective?
Right.
Because if it's not moving towards the shared objective, then you're putting in a lot of time and effort for something that's never going to pan out for you, and actually probably not for that other person either. So as a business coach, right, you've got multiple clients, and some clients just want to fight you tooth and nail and everything you do. It's like at the dojo. Like I have people sometimes come in, and it's great that they have experiences and backgrounds in other martial arts and things that they've done. And even, when we go shooting, we're at the range, and as you know, there's like a million, expert firearms instructors in this world, whatever.
Oh yeah. All doing different things.
Yeah. And everybody's got their take, right? Which is great. It's an experience. It's a lesson. It's a skill. That's something they've picked up. But you've come to my house and you're asking me for my opinion and my advice to teach you X, Y, Z. And then you're fighting me on it, telling me you already know ABC. So then why are you paying me to tell me that you already know this? And I've had this conversation. It's like this. I've told people just recently, something that dawned on me. I said to a couple folks, I said, Name me one person you truly respect in this world. And I don't mean like from a podcast or like, you know, the Pope or, you know,
in your life. Yeah.
Somebody in your life that you respect, that when they open their mouth about something serious, you're like, yeah, that really makes me think. I don't have to agree with it, but it makes me think. Right. And I can tell you that I spent the better part of my life trying to find people like that. Right. And I've been fortunate. I named a few off from my corporate world, you know, from my martial arts firearms world. You know, Dr. Joseph Babowski, you know him real well, right? Yep. I mean, he's one of my greatest mentors and friends I could have ever asked for. You know, I got another guy down in Atlanta, you know, W.S. Bumgarner, and he runs the school in Atlanta, and we're friends. He's technically my student, but the reality is I talk to him every couple of days just to hear his thoughts. And we joke around a lot and laugh about a lot of really dumb stuff, and we're very childish. But we have some really in-depth conversations that make me think. And people like that are who you should surround yourself with and who you should offer to be around. Right? So if you've got people that are constantly pushing back on you, then you're like, then why are you here? We don't have the same shared objective or goal. My goal was to try to give you something to help you be better based upon what you told me. However, your actions are telling me that you just want to tell me about something else. So I'm not looking for you to tell me that you respect me more than God. That has nothing to do with it. I'm asking, is there anybody in this world that's close to you that you would listen to?
I love that question. I think even just asking that question as a tool to kind of get an insight on what type of person you're dealing with, I might steal that from you, my friend. I think that is a great tactic.
It's yours.
Because you're hitting on something that I just told someone recently about my consulting business, and they go, really? And I said the same thing. I said, I qualify my clients. I start talking to them, and if they seem like the person who's not going to be receptive to what I'm teaching them, I know what I'm teaching them is going to work. I am 100% confident that my intellectual property, my systems, they work. I know they've performed. I've got the data. If I start talking to them and I feel like, well, they only want to take pieces of it, or they actually just want me to say what they're already saying, screw you, dude. I don't want your money, because you're going to water down my product. You are going to water down what I'm offering other people. And then, you know, obviously you're doing the same thing on the martial arts side. If they come to you and they start saying, well, I know this, I know that, I know this, I know that, well, then why are you here? Because you're going to go out, I'm going to teach you something. You're not going to do it. Therefore, you're going to water down my product because now my name is attached to what you're out there doing.
Right.
I don't like that. So I think that's really cool to hear just from an outside business perspective on that same exact concept. Qualify the people that you're putting this stuff in front of. I want to hit on two more things as we kind of get closer to wrapping up here, and they're connected. One of the things I have loved about this conversation is that you have mentioned multiple times putting the objective often as the first thing you talk about. And that is one of the main things that I teach in my classes and my systems is that, for example, when you start planning something, what's the first thing you do? You define and disseminate the objective to everyone that's involved. And then you make sure everyone understands that objective. Another part about it is that I'm a huge believer in a culture of debriefing. Debrief. So many times we go do things and then we walk away taking none of the lessons learned that we could have had. So I'm a huge believer in debriefing, but what's the first step in my debriefing model? Restate and reaffirm the objective.
Yeah,
you have to make sure everyone fully understands the objective. And that kind of goes to my second point that I kind of want to drill down a little bit more on is working backwards, because that's also something in my work with a company called Afterburner Inc. They're a consulting company that works mostly with Fortune 500 corporations, really high level stuff, some absolutely incredibly experienced and tenured individuals that I've had the privilege of working with there. And part of what they teach is really focusing on working backwards. This is where you want to be. Well, before you get there, what step is right before? What step is right before that? What step is right before that? And that's something that, frankly, I see so much power in. And both of those concepts, the objective and working backwards, remind me of perhaps one of the most influential men in my life. And he may not even fully know that. And I doubt he'll ever even hear this podcast. But if he did, he'd probably be surprised to hear me say it. a man named Andrew Desmond, who is an absolute legend in the reconnaissance community in the United States Marine Corps. At the time, I was able to work under him. I was at 3rd Recon Battalion, based out of Okinawa, Japan. Battalion Recon, I hadn't even made it to the force teams yet, but we had a deployment to Afghanistan, and I was under him. Now, before the deployment is where he really gave the most value to me, and I think to also all my other brothers on the teams. And there definitely is a problem, especially right now in the veteran community with mental health. PTSD has been on the rise, and there's been a lot of questions of what's going on. Why are 22 veterans a day? And I know that statistic is a little wishy-washy and maybe a little bit splashy in order to get attention, but the vibe behind it holds true. Why are 22 veterans a day killing themselves? And, I've had team members that have killed themselves, unfortunately. And I think that part of the reason, and I'm not saying that I haven't had struggles or other guys on my teams haven't had struggles, but specifically with that team that I was a part of that went to Afghanistan, this is in 2010, we were given very specific training from, at the time, Gunnery Sergeant Andrew Desmond. I think he ended up working his way up to and eventually leaving the Marine Corps as a master sergeant, maybe master gunnery sergeant. And he was, like I said, absolute legend, one of the original founders of MARSOC when it was still Det 1. But he intentionally, me as a Green Marine, never seen combat in my life, he intentionally gave us training and classes to make us understand what combat would do to us. He talked about the physiological effects. He talked about what it would do to our hearing, what it would do to our eyesight, what it would do to our heart rate. I mean, he got into the science of it. And then he started talking about what the emotional effects are, and he trained us on it. And at the time, I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm hearing this, but I've never experienced this, so I guess I don't know. Looking back, starting working backwards, essentially, and understanding this is what's going to happen, and this is how it is, and I'm going to give as much information as I can. I don't know exactly how it's going to happen for you particularly, but having that training ahead of time, as opposed to going into combat, doing multiple tours. I mean, let's look at our brothers and sisters that served in Vietnam. They were treated horribly, and there was zero focus on their mental health. And what did we see? We saw horrible results. Well, I think the most value, if we want to solve mental health today, and whether it's military, law enforcement, or civilians that go through horrible things in life, because guess what? You don't have to serve in the military to go through hard things. Maybe if we started training people ahead of time to understand, hey, this is what's going to happen. These are the effects, and you need to understand that and not necessarily expect it, but accept it when it comes. And when those things did come to me, I didn't go, what the hell is this? Oh my gosh, what is happening with me? I said, oh, okay, I know what this is. And so I know that that's a little bit of an extreme example when we're sitting here talking about business and P&L statements, and but it trickles down. And I think when you're dealing with something in business or leadership in general, if you can work backwards, if you can make sure you understand your objective, what is your end point? What are the things that are going to happen, and you accept those, that anxiety goes away, and it's exactly what you're saying. When I asked you, I said, okay, well, how do we deal with these people that are really struggling with anxiety and they don't know what's going to happen? And you said, well, let's start at the end and work backwards. And that's exactly what at the time Gunny Desmond did for us. And I think if more people could wrap their heads around that, if more people could understand the power of that, we wouldn't see a lot of these problems with anxiety and freezing up or lack of action due to fear of the results. It's kind of popular to say, based on some of these CEOs that have come out and talked about, hey, we want to move fast and break things, or fail fast and learn faster. And although those are kind of, kitschy, whatever, the sentiment behind it, I actually really believe in. The problem is that people are saying them as slogans and not really accepting what that means. Like, hey, when we say fail fast, you understand what failure is, right? You understand what that feels like? Have you ever failed before? It sucks. It fucking sucks, man. I know I have failed several times in my life. probably several times today. but it sucks. It's difficult. And so I think if we can stop we're making progress in the fact that those things are slogans now. But if we can take those from slogans and make people really understand what that means, I think we are going to see a complete turnaround in a lot of these, frankly, emotional problems that are hindering our industrial actions. And I think everything you're saying lends truth to that, lends support to that. I can only hope that there are more people like you out there that are, and I know, and I'm not sitting here trying to kiss your ass. You've met me. I'm not really much of an ass kisser, but I do hope that there are people that have that same mindset of, hey, I've figured these certain aspects out in life based on some of it just dumb luck, just stuff you kind of land into, mentors showing up at the right time. People that listen to this podcast know I am a huge advocate for actively seeking out good mentors. Maybe it's just you end up in a circumstance and for whatever reason, you decided you were going to take lessons out of it instead of just wallow in your misery, whatever it might be. We need more people that have experienced those things to pass down some of that wisdom in a way that can be heard and understood to other generations of workers, leaders, friends, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, people, humans. So I love your message, man. I appreciate you coming on tonight. This has been a great conversation. I'm hoping we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, I'd love to.
And I like to kind of close out the show tonight with just kind of giving you the floor for a few minutes. Bill O'Reilly back in the day says, "You get the final word," and then usually he'd hang up with his guests and be like, "That fucking idiot! I'm not giving him the final word." No, but seriously, just kind of if you could sum up this conversation, and if there was one message that you could put out to aspiring leaders, current leaders, or people who are struggling in that leadership space, what would it be? What would you say to them?
Man,
I know that's a lot, right? I'm like, hey, solve all the world's problems right now.
Right.
You got 5 minutes.
I wish I could solve all my problems. We talked about a lot of great stuff, and by no means am I an expert in anything. And I love telling people that because I've often said the moment I think I have become the expert is probably the moment I'm going to die, right? So I'd rather not be at that spot right now. But, we talked about having purpose in life and value, regardless of where you're at. And the purpose will get you through the hard times in life. Whatever it is, being an entrepreneur and opening a new business, right? And not knowing if you're going to survive, and creditors and debtors and worrying about your profits and your losses, and, asking a young lady out that you run into, right? I've got a young nephew that's 22, and I'm always pushing him a little bit in the back, like, "Hey, go talk to that girl." Hey, and he's scared to death, right? I'm like, "Son, if I had your looks back when I was your age, my goodness." But all of those things, to me, it's about having purpose and feeling valued. And I think if you're able to showcase that as a leader to those that are around you, and you're looking, the same direction, at the same path and the same road, and you have figured out what you're trying to get to, and then you have, broken it down on what are the steps that's going to take. Having focus, having emotional fortitude for the focus will create, some kind of discipline. Your discipline is going to create your habits. And then from your habits, it should create consistency, because consistency will get you your success. And I read something the other day that I think is kind of cool. I'm not a Christian or a Catholic per se. I'm a Sikh, and I have spent a lot of time studying other religions as well, because I like to understand people. Okay.
Yeah.
We can agree to disagree, right? But I like to understand people. But I read something the other day because Pope Francis passed away, right?
Right.
And he's got a quote where he said, I'm just going to read it to you: "Rivers do not drink their own water. Trees do not eat their own fruit. The sun does not shine on itself, and flowers do not spread their fragrance for themselves. Living for others is a rule of nature. We're all born to help each other. No matter how difficult it is, life is good when you are happy, but you're much better when others are happy because of you.
Wow.
And I read that a couple of days ago. I'm like, man, that says it all.
Wow. Yeah.
About serving others' needs before you serve yours, right? I think if we as people in any walk of life could truly embody that idea that I will share my skill set with you, Joe, because we have a shared goal that you want to get better at,
right.
And I am vested in seeing you be successful, man. Just the sky's the limit, and
Yep,
we are in one of the greatest nations and cultures of all time, And we all complain about things, right? I'm guilty of that, but I also know that the complaints don't hold me back from pushing forward. Right. Whereas a lot of people, they do, because we have created a culture where individuals just expect things to be a certain way. And the first sign of a challenge, it's not their problem, or they give up. If we didn't have challenges in our lives every day,
what's the point?
Living, right?
What's the point?
What's the point, right? Like, I'm not a big proponent of all those little sayings like, well, God wouldn't give you this if he didn't make, whatever. Like that stuff makes me nuts. I hate that stuff.
Right.
But I do believe that without those things, you can't grow as a person because you're already comfortable. And when you learn how to be uncomfortable, you will grow and you'll be better for yourself and those around you. So my last word is I really appreciate you having me on your show.
Absolutely, man. This has been great.
I'm very honored that you, asked me to be on here. I am going to be even more honored when you and all the guys from out west come out here at the end of the year, which I'll have information for.
I'm already prepping my liver.
Well,
I'm training. I'm training right now.
Yeah, we're gonna do a lot of shooting before we do that, though. So, I'm looking forward to that, and that's all I got. I'd love to spend some more time with you talking about all kinds of things.
Awesome.
Your brain.
Love it, man. Absolutely love it. Okay, I got one more question because this is just like in the back of my head, and I know it's kind of conspiracy theory kind of crap, but we mentioned the Pope. Dude died on Easter.
Yeah.
I'm calling bullshit.
Yeah.
He must have died a couple days before, and they're like, you know what? Let's let the body marinate.
You never know.
And on Easter, then we can make a big deal about it. Yeah. Am I right?
Yeah, it could be, man. I mean, heck, it may not even be him. I mean, I don't know. I
was dead for months.
I wasn't there. I don't know.
Maybe I'm crazy. I'm crazy. That's the first thing that popped in my head. I'm like, died on Easter. That's a little too perfect, bro. That's a little too perfect. Rest his soul, though. Rest his soul. All right, absolutely. Man. Hey, again, appreciate it. For listeners of the show, I know we talked about having a panel of coaches on. Unfortunately, we had some scheduling issues, so we are still working on getting that group together. However, I've got some other great guests lined up. We've got a former gang member from the Crips that is going to talk about leadership in a totally different environment than most of us have ever experienced. But man, he is a really interesting individual who has accomplished and actually overcome so much in his life that it's just an impactful story. I'm really looking forward to that. We've also got a couple individuals from the military side, the one specifically that worked in the medical side as a corpsman for United States Marines, saving people's lives day in, day out. And now he does the same genuinely impressive work, saving veterans' lives as a mental health counselor. Another great interview with him on how to lead people that are at the lowest point in their lives. So tune in next time. We'll have some more episodes rolling for you guys. Thank you so much for joining. Good luck. And remember, leadership is not about you. It's about leading other human beings. Sukh, thank you, my friend. We look forward to talking to you again. Take care.